Cooldog, we have Aveitt. For this debate, Cooldog's taken the position that Trump isn't a fascist. Aveitt's taken the opposition. As always, winner will be based upon who concedes. We don't get a vocal concession from either participant. We'll put it to a voting poll in which you, the audience, can decide on who you think performed better overall in the debate. For this debate, it's going to be a little different. We're doing the Lincoln-Douglas format. So Aveitt will be opening up with his affirmative, constructive, and then afterwards, Cooldog will have a cross-examination, and then I'll be jumping in, cutting them off at the respective times so they can switch around and do the proper format. And then afterwards, after the format has been satisfied, we'll just go into back and forth conversation until they're done. Thank you both for debating. You can get started.
Give me 1 second. I just want to hit start on a stopwatch so that way I kind of know how much.
Yeah, same. I'm doing the same thing too.
All right, awesome. I'm gonna go ahead and hit start on my stopwatch then. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to me. I really appreciate it. Um, Normally when we use the word fascist, I think that it has like a really fuzzy definition. So this is going to be, I think, the most key contention in this debate. Not exactly what exactly Trump's trying to do. So we'll just start with like a couple of key points on like what fascism has been historically, what I think it means culturally, and the main 14 points of your fascism, which is kind of known as eternal fascism. As like history goes on, fascism's different things to different cultures, and there's 14 main key points that fascism could take any one of these points and like extrapolate to. Um, like any one of these points could be like the main key point of that fascist society, but usually it'll incorporate all 14 into some sort of general structure. So first we're going to say that fascists believe that liberal democracy is obsolete, and they regard it to the complete mobilization of society under a totalitarian one party as necessary to prepare the nation for armed conflict and response to effective economic difficulties. Um, of course, strong leaders um, and right wing authoritarianism. Uh, we'll go ahead and I'm just going to try to get through all 14 of these. Let's go for it. All right, so first we have the cult of tradition. That is when all truth has been revealed by tradition. You can't really like learn new things. This is where like Trump's "Make America Great Again" rhetoric comes in. He just values tradition. The rejection of modernism is point number two. If the Enlightenment was the age of reason, fascism is the like age of irrationalism, a rejection of science and modern thinking. This would be a great example of Trump pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord and his whole response to COVID. You have number three, the cult of action for action's sake. That's kind of just doing things as like a attack on modern culture and kind of a push for like strength, I guess. And this could be seen as anti-intellectualism that Trump is pushing against like educated liberal elites, um, not following protocols when he's talking to other foreign leaders, like his Twitter tirades about other foreign leaders, right? That would be kind of what's going on there. Number four is disagreement is treason. This is Trump labeling any sort of bad publicity he has as fake news, um, and that like he calls the press the enemy of the people. I would also say this is a really good example of Trump just being fundamentally anti-freedom. This is maybe what I think's the scariest about him. That's close there. Five, fear of difference. The first appeal of a fascist is to try to get you against a what the majority of the population would be seen as like the other. This could be Trump's birther lie about Obama, all of his rhetoric about building the wall, his failed policies to try to get a Muslim ban, and that he spoke about a lot on the campaign trail. Number 6 is an appeal to a frustrated middle class. This would be Trump's promises to bring back coal and try to appeal to a time where like white Americans thought they were doing better. Number 7 is an obsession with plot. Um, some sort of narrative to make it seem like the population's under attack. Of course, Trump's again xenophobia there, remarks about Muslims and how he thinks that there's like something going on, but he doesn't know. They'll figure it out. 8 casts enemies as too weak and too strong at the same time. I think this is like a really good example of like what he'll call the radical left. He'll be like, oh, they're a bunch of dumb college students, but also they're destroying America and they're gonna like burn down all our cities. Number 9 is pacifism, is trafficking with the enemy. Fascists don't want there to be any sort of peace. We haven't seen any sort of peaceful rhetoric from Trump. He increased the military budget. He created a new branch of the military budget where we don't even have enemies in space, but we have a space force now. Number 10 is contempt for the weak. This again kind of goes back to like the far left, which he'll call weak. You saw the way he spoke to his political opponents, called them weak. Number 11, everybody is educated to become a hero. This is him kind of attacking like the politically correct culture and how you say like, oh, you need to like stand out if you're a right or if you're like Christian, you need to not stay silent. And I really wish we could have gotten through all of these, but it looks like I'm out of time, so I guess that's going to be it. But as we've seen, he hasn't missed a single one of these.
Yeah, so Cooldog, you can jump in with your cross-examination for 3 minutes.
Yeah, okay. So my first question is going to be on the disagreement is treason point. Who has been executed by Trump for disagreeing with him?
Fortunately, just because, fortunately in America, we
Has
have things to try to.
anybody been executed for disagreeing with Trump?
I mean, unfortunately for him, we have policies to prevent this from happening. TYT has lost their press passes. He's done everything he can to silence opposition. Um,
Is Trump
yeah.
above the courts?
Uh, Currently, no.
So what you're saying is that Trump is not an authoritarian then?
No, I'm saying he's an authoritarian, but limited by the United States government.
All right,
It's
cool.
possible.
So
If your contention is he hasn't killed anybody yet, then it isn't on the
okay.
basis of what he is,
Sure,
just the
sure, sure,
basis
sure.
on our
I have
government.
another question about the frustrated middle class. Do the middle class work in coal mines, or are those the working class?
I would call him the working class. I don't
Okay.
like the definition of middle class.
Okay, so he's appealing to the working class, not the middle class, correct?
I think he's appealing to white Midwesterners.
Do you think that Trump has this is on like your point 9, has Trump made an enemy out of North Korea? Has he continued that?
Um, no,
Has Trump instituted a no-fly zone in Syria like
no,
Hillary Clinton wanted to? No,
nope.
right? Does Trump not tweet about black supporters of him? Doesn't he embrace when people who are different than him support him?
Only in the regard to make himself look bigger.
Okay, but he isn't afraid of difference, right?
No, he absolutely is. He
Okay.
tokenizes those people.
How is
In the way in which he gets support from minorities, he uses it to say they are different from me, but they love me because I'm so good.
I got you. So could you really quickly, this is just a point of information, could you define what liberalism is in your definition of fascism, like anti-liberal?
Oh yeah, I would say it's more in this regard I meant it kind of more in a classical sense, not like the modern like neoliberalism. I meant it in a sense of like Enlightenment values, caring about freedom, caring about free speech, caring about the private ownership of property, stuff like
Alright,
that.
I got you. So that'll be the end of my cross X. So now it is my turn for my constructive, right?
Yep, 7 minutes.
Alright, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and start my timer now. So the way that this is going to work is I'm going to present 5 separate contentions for why Trump is not a fascist, and then I'm going to address his case points specifically. So the first contention is he's legitimately elected. There's absolutely no coup attempt, and there's no destruction of the previous election / political establishment. If Trump is saying that the election is unfair, makes him a fascist, if that's what makes him a fascist, then Al Gore has to be one too, because he also thought the election was unfair. The second point on this is both parties do shady shit to get elected, and both parties are corrupted. Both of them are trying to influence the election through social media and advertisements. The third point on this is he's not an authoritarian dictatorship. As my opponent said, he's not above the courts. We have a two-party system in the Senate and the House. They still make the laws. Executive orders have been struck down by the court, so he's not authoritarian. The next one is there's no sanctioned domestic political killings like we see with fascism. There's no like militant, killings of anti-Trump people. So he's not a fascist in that regard. And then lastly, why is there a two-party system under Trump if he's fascist? The fascists have historically tried to destroy the two-party system, right? So why does Trump keep letting this go if he's an actual authoritarian with power? He doesn't, because he's not actually a fascist. He believes in democracy. Two, the second contention. So that's the illegitimate government contention. The second contention is that he is not an expansionist or an imperialist on foreign policy. Trump has not substantially increased U.S. military presence abroad. He's not engaged with war with North Korea. He's not engaged in war with Syria. Where's the proverbial Ethiopia that the Italian fascists wanted to take over? Where's the proverbial Austria that we Anschluss? Right? There's no expansion of military borders for Trump. He's not trying to get a war. In fact, Hillary Clinton would seem to be, and the Democratic Party seem to be more of a warmonger than him. There's absolutely no new wars. If we're to count creating new wars as fascist and expansionism, then we have to say that Bush and Obama are both fascist, right? And there's no nationalization of arms production, which is universal across all fascist and all fascist cultures. Third contention: no government-run mandatory propaganda. PBS is not a Trump-touting news agency, neither is NPR. There's no state-run propaganda that's mandatory for you to watch. Most media is actually opposed to Trump. Trump is doing nothing to curtail this with his actual strong arming of the law. He just lets it happen, right? And then see optically, in every single other junta or fascist regime or coup attempt or whatever, we see the leaders, wearing military garb and awarding themselves with decorations and things like that. When Trump goes on the aircraft carrier on a military tour, he's wearing civilian clothing, except with his Make America Great Again hat. So he's not fascist in optics even. Fourth contention: most political violence does not come from Trump's party. More violence and destruction come from Antifa than Trump. If political violence is the sole bar to fascism, then Antifa is fascist. There's no real collapse of the public-private divide. We don't see the government coming into people's private lives and telling them what to believe politically. And then there's no state-sponsored political militia groups. Those are all civilian groups that happen to support him. It's democratic in nature. It's not specifically state-run. Fifth contention: economically, Trump is not demanding more production or other types of production correctly to be a fascist. In fact, Trump is criticized for forwarding a free market, not a more regulated state-run economy system like fascists do. He's not demanding that certain companies produce a certain thing. He's not nationalizing them under like the Trumpian fascist regime. And there's no requirement to be a fascist in order to do business, which is very popular. You have to agree politically with us in order to do business, right? Lastly, we're not isolationists. We're still hella dependent on others. We're still taking out a ton of debt with other people. We're still interacting with the global economy. We're not isolationists. And there's no like condemnation of material wealth that comes with fascism. Usually in like Italian and like German fascist regimes, we see that you put yourself above, like your own material possessions come below the state's needs and the people's needs as a collective. Like the state itself is more important than material possessions. And we see that Trump, in fact, encourages us to have these material possessions. So those are my five separate contentions for this debate. If you think one of them is true, you should vote for me because this proves that he's not a fascist. Let's get into Aveitt's case specifically. So first, on his first point of fascism, he says that fascism differs in different cultures. I agree with this that there may be different manifestations, but you still have to hold together a collective sort of coherent group of ideas or a coherent thing that makes someone a fascist, right? You still have to have a certain core thing, because otherwise, if there's not like this group resemblance, then right, we could call China fascist, which we don't want to call, right? We don't want to call the communists fascist, and they seem to be doing a lot of things on this list, right? So how can we differentiate between the two? There is some core things that are fascist. Um, on his first point about the cult of tradition, notably for like European fascism, right? They're harkening back to like a bygone era. Like, the Germans will talk about the Holy Roman Empire and their increased national borders. The Italians will talk about the Roman Empire, and it's all linked to like their national borders and their control of the world. Trump is only doing this domestically, right? He's not doing this. He's not harkening back to like the Middle Ages or a bygone era that nobody really remembers, which is the key for fascism. In fact, the tradition that he is targeting is very vague in nature. It's not really sure what time he's talking about. All he wants to do is bring back more manufacturing jobs. We say that he does action for action's sake. I'm not really sure what this means, because I see a lot of Democrats doing action for action's sake, putting up these bills all over the place. And so are we going to call them a fascist for doing actions that have actually no consequence whatsoever? I don't think that that's necessarily true. Um, we have disagreement as treason, as already mentioned. Trump embraces media attention. He likes it when his name is in the news, even when people disagree with him. He's doing absolutely nothing to stop disagreement. We see protesters are allowed to legally assemble. He's not like sending out the Gestapo to round up Black Lives Matter members and basically put all of them in cages like a fascist would actually do. They're still allowed to protest and things like that. Fear of otherness, I touched on that in my question, right? We see that actually Trump glorifies difference when they agree with him. He's not necessarily afraid of them. It's a very hit or miss thing. That's called politics, right? Enemy creation, we actually see, and I think this is a big point on foreign policy. We see with enemy creation that this is actually lessened, right? So basically, what happened? We don't see that there's a creation of new enemies. There's no proverbial Ethiopia that we're going after, right? Trump is actually trying to make more friends with Russia, more friends with like North Korea and things like that. And so that seems to be very anti-fascist from my perspective. And so with that, I will take my opponent's question.
Okay, Aveitt, if you want to start your cross-examination, you have 3 minutes.
Do you believe that a world superpower or a world leader can be a political actor separate from his state government?
Do I think? Yes, I believe
Okay.
that.
Um. Uh. When we say that he's not murdering people in the streets, do you feel like censoring people's voice would be a form of murder?
I
Like,
don't think that Trump has censored any media outlets from putting something to the press.
okay. Um. I mean, he has taken away people's. You're aware that he's taken away DYT's
Yeah,
press.
but Obama has. I mean, but that's not silencing someone. That's
I.
just
It
not
doesn't
allowing them.
matter if you mentioned Hillary, Obama, and Bush multiple times. They're irrelevant to this conversation. I would probably say that Bush is a fascist too,
All right,
maybe
fair
more
enough.
so. So
Fair enough.
I don't. Yeah. Um. I guess. I didn't have a whole lot of questions. I just kind of wanted to talk a lot. I think I'm done with my cross examinations.
Okay.
Okay, cool. If you're all set, then we can move on to your first affirmative rebuttal. You have 4 minutes for that.
Okay, so listening to him speak, I find it really strange that most of his contentions were not that Trump isn't doing these things that seem fascistic, but that he's not going far enough. My main comment with this is Trump was inherited a government that he didn't get the chance to structure, and that thankfully our court systems make it very hard to change anything in Americans in our constitution and such. Because of this, he hasn't been able to get more erroneous things across. But I don't think that doesn't mean he doesn't want to do it. if Trump is, if my opponent's disagreement with me isn't that Trump isn't feeling these ways, he doesn't have fascistic tendencies, just that he's not doing enough, I don't see how that doesn't make him a fascist. It just means, thankfully, America's Constitution is strong enough to limit him from doing this, but not that he's not trying to do these things. I haven't heard a single good response to how him taking away TYT's press pass isn't some form of censorship. He said that no media outlet has been censored. TYT is the largest left-leaning private, I don't know if they're private, non-corporate media atmosphere, and for him to take away their press pass is huge. He mentioned also that he's not doing anything to stop protesters in his uh, point against number 3. I really think that he has. He called in the federal troops against the protesters in Portland, against what the state governor wanted. He sent in federal troops. They tear gassed people. They rounded people up in vans, drove them around for hours, and then took pictures of them and their IDs. And we don't know why they did that, and they were unmarked troops when they did it. So maybe we're not at the point yet where he's outright killing protesters, but we've definitely seen that tendency from him, and we've seen it hard. It wasn't until he started doing that where I said, like, holy shit, this man is a fascist, because this was like where I really think he crossed the line. um uh the other part that I thought was really funny was him saying that he was legitimately elected. Currently, he has been, but for the past, I'd say, like 4 months or so, Trump's been pushing this narrative of saying that the future elections are going to be tampered with mail-in voting. Which, if you've known anything, you've known that mail-in voting has been something America has done since the Civil War. So mail-in voting is fine and it's safe, but he's been pushing this narrative that you can't trust it, that they're going to hamper all of the votes. We're going to see on November 3rd that Trump's probably going to get a lot of votes because Republicans aren't as scared as COVID, or they weren't until Trump got COVID. Maybe this will change things. Um, but until this point, what everyone thought was going to happen is after November 3rd, he's going to call it and say, I won, because they won't have finished counting the mail-in ballots yet, where we're going to see that Biden's probably going to win. So to say that he was legitimately elected and that be your argument for why he's not a fascist, I found hysterical if you've been paying attention to him and his rhetoric over the past couple months. And yeah.
Okay. Do you want to do your negative rebuttal for 6 minutes,
Sure.
Cooldog?
Okay, so all right, let's go to it. So I'd like to address. I'd like to bring to the audience attention that my opponent has not talked at all about the expansionism that is required for fascism. He's completely dropped the point about propaganda. He's completely dropped the point about the economics, and he's completely dropped the point on those 3 contentions specifically. So those should be flowed through for me, and you should vote on this debate for that reason. So now let's get into specifically. Let's talk about legitimate government, right? Let's talk about that. So the last point that my opponent made on this part of the argument is that, well, Trump has been talking about how there could be mail-in ballot fraud, and I agree with him. This country's been doing mail-in ballots for ages. However, where I disagree with him is that simply because one is questioning fraud does not then make one a fascist. I mean, we saw this in the 2000 election with Al Gore. The poor Democrats were always talking about how it was unfair, how there was corruption. This was not a legitimate election. So critiquing election procedures is not in itself fascist, right? It would seem like the fascists would want to eliminate elections altogether, not try to make it better or try to figure out if there is fraud in it, right? That doesn't seem to be necessarily fascist within itself. Um, he says that the main point is that well, Trump has these fascistic tendencies, but he isn't actually able to do it. Well, I want to submit to you that he actually should have to do it because, for example, Mussolini was like placed in the Italian parliament as the prime minister, and then he called in his boys to remove the parliament. right? Trump has not actually done the move that Hitler or Mussolini actually did, which is to take control of the parliament after being placed in a position of power. He has left the government in place, right? Like a fascist would say, fuck the courts, I do what I want, right? I'm an authoritarian, I am the state, right? Trump isn't doing that. He's actually respecting the courts, and his executive orders have been struck down by the courts, and he's made no move to dissolve the government, right? And there's been no move to dissolve the Democratic Party by force. All other fascists have destroyed opposition forcefully. They've taken an active move, not this implicit fascistic tendencies. Oh, boo-hoo, liberal media, fake news talk. No, the fascist goes in there with guns and billy clubs and knocks some people out on the street, right? Trump hasn't done that. Just the fact that the other fact is if we're to admit that just simply having fascist tendencies causes one to be fascist, right, then we're also going to have to say that, you know, China and communist Russia were fascist, which doesn't make any sense, because just having one characteristic and a family resemblance of characteristics that make up the definition of fascism does not in fact make one fascist. You have to satisfy more than just specifically wanting to you know, having this desire for more power, which I think we would all readily agree all politicians want their party to win, right? And that seems to be what Trump is doing. He wants his party to win. And if he's not actually doing the steps to actually take over the government and have this authoritarian control, then I don't think he qualifies for being fascist. Now let's move on to the other point that we're going to talk about, the TYT press pass and this Portland tear gassing thing on the this freedom of dissent and things like that. Well, so I don't has Trump has never made it impossible for liberal outlets to publish what they wanted, and TYT's viewership has actually gone down over years because they're a shitty news organization with shitty opinion, right? And they're not really big enough, perhaps, to justify a press pass, or they were breaking norms that were within the White House. But he hasn't like refused press passes of like MSNBC. Like he hasn't actually stopped the big liberal news outlets from asking him questions or having access to him. And furthermore, he has in no way blocked. He has in absolutely no way blocked the Young Turks from commenting on him. He has in no way blocked any liberal news outlet from disagreeing with him. Right? In fact, if you Google Trump's name, you'll see more negative stories about Trump than positive ones. Where's the fascist here? We need somebody in the fascist state to clamp down on this negative propaganda, right? People are still allowed to disagree with Trump and not be a quote fascist and do business. They're still allowed to live their lives as Democrats, right? There's still a two-party system, and there's still an open media that people are allowed to criticize Trump for. I don't understand why the removal of one agency's press pass all of a sudden makes one fascist. Again, if this is the only thing that would make one fascist, then we have to call all communists fascists. And we have to call any deplatforming whatsoever also fascist, because removing a press pass apparently necessitates that you're fascist. I don't buy that. He says that the Portland tear gassing happens. Well, there have been tons of riots in American history where these anti-riot measures have taken place. We've seen this many, many, many times before in American history. We've seen it all over Europe as well. Just controlling a riot in no way makes one a fascist directly. I'd also like to mention that in the Obama administration, we had secret police and secret court. Right, in the Obama administration, we had this, and my opponent has said that he doesn't believe that Obama's a fascist. So what's the difference here, right? And again, if this is the sole thing that makes someone a fascist, then there would be a ton of groups and states that we would want to say aren't fascist, right? That would be under this definition. Again, China, Russia, etc. So in the final 20 seconds, I want to reiterate, he has not talked about the foreign policy expansionism. He has not talked about the optics and the political violence. He's not talked about the economic things that would make Trump a fascist. And overall, I think that he's just pointing out a couple of things that are like fascism, but do not fit the full family resemblance of what fascism is.
Okay. Aveitt, you have a 3-minute second affirmative rebuttal.
Okay, wait. Just double checking. Am I asking him questions? This isn't a cross examination, right? This is just me refuting.
This is your speech.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you. Let me get my timer started. All right, am I free to go?
Oh yeah.
Okay, starting now. All right, so What I really think we just need to talk about is the propaganda in the military. Um, he kind of seems like he already agrees with most of my points there. So I really guess these are the two that I really need to talk about. I don't understand how I've mentioned that he's created a new wing in our military, and he just like let that slide. He's like, "Oh yeah, he hasn't expanded anything. He just created like a new wing and increased the military budget by like I think it was roughly 35%." Um I'm not exactly sure what point Trump needs to start new wars for when we're already in 7 wars that he can currently play around in. Um, he somehow bumbled himself not getting into a war with North Korea. The intricacies of that are very, very interesting. I think it's mainly due to South Korean leadership. The South Korean leader has been trying to get out of that Korean War for a long time, and the way he was able to do it was Trump's not very smart, and he appealed to Trump's ego and said, "Wow, Trump's doing so much good in ending this war," and just gave Trump credit for ending the war when really it was his diplomacy that got it through. If anybody's really curious, I really recommend looking into it. It's fascinating. And then talking about propaganda, if anybody's familiar with Noam Chomsky's book, um, fuck, the name escapes me right now. Manufacturing consent. Uh, that corporate media is a better propagandist than state-run media. State-run media at least will have some sort of contention with the government, while corporate media needs to appeal to leaders as much as possible to try to get more interviews and more times with people who are interesting figures. Um, and because of that, Trump has no reason to actually uh, create any sort of state-run media if corporate media does it better and does it more religiously. You're never going to hear anything incriminating about Trump on Fox News. And if you do, that host probably doesn't stick around for a whole long time because they're just going to do what he wants anyways. So yeah, when it comes to the military, when it comes to propaganda, when it comes to the way he's currently running everything, he meets the definition of fascism in all accounts, and is just through his own like lack of ability able to make more happen. But if Trump was a more competent leader, he would be a definitely no questioning fascist.
Okay, that's time. So that satisfies the Lincoln Douglas format. Now, you guys told me that after the format was satisfied, you wanted to go back and forth, so you guys can do that. Just a reminder, you opted out of moderation, and there's also no time limit, so winner will just be based upon who concedes, and whenever you guys just want to put it to a voting poll if no one concedes. Have fun.
That was pretty fun. I enjoyed it. It was an experiment for the format.
Yeah, the format was really cool.
Yeah. Um, yeah, blood sport time, boys. All right, so what do you want to I guess I can just ask you what specifically you want to talk about in the free form discussion period.
Um, I guess my question is your only contention with our argument not any policies he holds, not any attitudes he has, but you're just saying he's not a fascist because certain actions haven't been taken yet, even though everything else we've seen from him is at least the start of a very strong fascistic government.
Well, I don't I mean, I want to argue that in some respects you're right, in other respects you're wrong. So I don't, for example, see his economic policy or like the way that he's dealing with foreign nations or the government itself to be part of what would make someone a fascist. Because I
I
don't think
mean,
that fascism,
Mussolini
yeah.
Mussolini said that fascism could just be described as corporatism, and under Trump, corporations have been doing fabulously great.
Yeah,
That
but like with the Italian fascism, corporation is not like we have in America. These are specifically like fascist labor unions. So in order to be able to sell and manufacture products, you need to be tied to the state. And so that's what Mussolini meant by corporations.
Okay. Um,
And like we don't see this is the economic point, right? We don't see that the government is nationalizing the arms industry, which all fascist governments have done. We don't see that that the government, except for maybe some PPE with coronavirus, we don't see the government specifically telling manufacturers this is how much you need to produce, this is how much you get for it, period. That's it. Right? We don't see that direct control of the economy that fascists so dearly love.
yeah. Do you feel like that's because see, the only reason I feel like he hasn't done this is because I don't think Trump is like smart or competent enough to do that.
I mean, fair enough, but it's also like he respects the rule of law and the government as well, and he doesn't have like a military junta to take over those institutions, right? Like,
Um, I mean, if we're gonna say he respects the rule of law exclusively when it comes to like corporate businesses, then I think maybe. I think you might be beating me on that one point.
I mean, the other thing is like he doesn't tote around the military to do his will, right? Maybe you could win on the protester point here, right? Sure, but he's not going around in every city in every council meeting with his fascist military posse around to make sure they're doing what the Trump state wants them to do,
I don't
right?
think he needs to. I think he gets the same sort of like the goal of having the military parades is to flex your power. Trump flexes his power just by having people wear the MAGA hat. I think that's like the exact same thing as like the military uniform is he has this the uniform being just the hat is the same thing to him. He doesn't need to have the military go around places except for when it comes to crushing protests. He just has his instead of like a parade, he has a rally, and I think the two facilitate the same actions.
Yeah, but he's not like forcing people to go to the rally, and he's not like forcing with the military people to be he's not enforcing martial law during these. And he's only really done one or two military parades, which have been like a cultural tradition in America for ages, right?
Yeah, I
He's
wasn't
not
gonna
he's not
fault him for
touring
that.
the entirety of the country with tanks like Mussolini did.
I just don't think he needs to for his ego.
Well, yeah, but I mean, he's not a fascist then. He's just an egotistical, like
He,
potentially he's just a like egotistical narcissist in a
so,
democratic system then.
so I I guess that's what I essentially mean here. If you're saying like, well, he doesn't have a fascist government, but he's a right wing authoritarian who doesn't like freedom, who like it just wants his ego inflated, and he just hasn't been able to do fascism yet. That would be my point. Just that he is a fascist who would like to do it but can't, isn't competent enough to,
I
is it
mean,
doesn't have the control of the state enough to because we've tried to limit this stuff.
sure, but like there's like a desire like in the abstract of wanting to control the state or whatever, but you would expect someone with actually deeply held fascist tendencies to at least try to do that, right?
Well, he has. He's tried to do a Muslim ban that got knocked down, and he's tried a bunch of other policies.
Yeah,
Uh,
but that's through the already established democratic process. Right? I would see a fascist of arming the National Guard at the airports or whatever and preventing people to go in, regardless of what the courts say. I'm talking Andrew Jackson, right? Fuck the courts, right? That's what Andrew Jackson said. You would have an argument for Andrew Jackson being a fascist, I think, because he's also trying to expand national borders. He's trying to subjugate other people, right? And he's ignoring the court's decisions, right? That would be, I would see to you that Andrew Jackson would maybe be an American fascist, but Trump isn't doing that. Trump isn't Andrew Jackson.
I I guess I'm just gonna say that he just doesn't have the competency to do it. I I'm sorry that our fascist president isn't like competent enough to be a fascist. Is that like you know what I mean? But he
No,
doesn't not hold those
yeah,
beliefs.
but like even the beliefs that he does hold on like the economy and on like America's like geopolitical place in the world don't seem to align with what even a like a terrible aspiring fascist would want, right? Trump isn't trying to annex Mexico, which was what I would think a fascist would do when they refused to build the wall, right?
I just have to say, thankfully, the Democrats were able to keep him in line there. Our government, the way it's structured, is structured thankfully in a way that tries to limit this as much as possible.
So our government is structured in a way that it becomes impossible to be an actual fascist. Is that what you're saying?
I Yeah, I think so. I think the
Well,
American
then
government's
Trump
really good at that.
can't really be a fascist then because he's the president in a government that doesn't allow him to be fascist.
No, well, I think that's my point. Yeah, he is a fascist. The government just limits him,
Yeah,
and that's
but why don't we see him with the like I don't get why we don't see him advocating, you know, direct production. I don't see why we're still paying out debts to other people and other nations. I don't understand why we're so interconnected economically then. And that's his freaking policy. Like that's not fascist. His economic policy is not fascist at all, right? And he's not like attempting to instill a totalitarian government. He's not doing that. He's not even trying, right? He's not even trying to oppose the courts. He's like he just issues an executive or did you drop Aveitt?
no, no.
Okay.
I'm just letting you go on.
Okay. Right. I just I don't see it. I mean, we could talk about the police of the protesters and talk about how like Bill Clinton had his Waco, Texas, and Bush and Obama had secret courts and they were spying on Americans too. So I don't see the difference.
Um, I don't know if I'm spicy enough to say that Obama was a fascist, but I'm definitely spicy enough to say that Bush was. I wasn't really involved. I don't know much about Clinton. If you want to talk about the Clinton thing, I'd love to hear
Yeah,
it.
so like in Waco, Texas, there was this cult or whatever, and they had a bunch of guns, and then freaking Bill Clinton went in there with tanks and stuff and, you know, killed those people. Like that's how the story goes, at least. Right? They launched in tear gas canisters, and then the building caught on fire, and a bunch of children died because Bill Clinton brought in the National Guard, this sort of culty area, and, you know, did this, right? So there have been times when there have been excessive force used throughout all of these types of people. It's not one specific instance that makes you a fascist. It's the continual habitual enforcement of martial law through the state that happens. And we don't have that in America, right? We just don't have that move happening. It's
Well, we just
continual.
have like the attacking of protesters by federal troops. I
Yeah,
I
but
guess so. We're kind of in this in between where economically he's not very fascistic, but we also have this situation where culturally uh, and freedom wise he's very fascistic. So I don't know where the
what
compromise
freedoms have you lost under Trump?
I mean the right to protest, bro. I don't think you necessarily have the right
Is
to
that the
protest if they're going to send in federal troops to tear gas you. That's not what it doesn't say in the First Amendment you can protest as long as
what?
you're okay with getting tear gassed.
But what I mean, sure, sure. I can agree with you that maybe the particular way that Trump is handling these protests is wrong and bad. But that isolated event in and of itself does not compare to the rights and freedoms that are lost under an actual fascistic government. There is no sole state run propaganda. And we can talk about Chomsky's argument if you want, and I think it's wrong. But if you want to, but I don't think you haven't lost the right to bear arms, which you would have under a fascist, right? Let's disarm the people. right? You haven't lost the ability to start your own business. You haven't lost the ability to
I mean,
assemble before quarantine. Like none
only
of this shit
the
happens during the daytime. Like he let
only
tracks
the
happen
Jews lost the
forever.
right to bear arms. Everyone else was still able to. I haven't heard anything about Mussolini taking away gun rights. Is that something he did?
I mean, they were pretty critical of the armed populace, but I mean, they were also drafting people into the military to start an expansionist war, which hasn't happened under Trump. All right, we can't just say that because one thing happens that a fascist did that one time, this then makes that person a fascist. It's a collection of things,
Well,
not just one thing.
we say that there's these group of points, and he nails all of them. He nails all of the cultural ones. He nails um all of the optic ones. He's
No, he
uh
doesn't.
yeah, he does.
He doesn't wear
Your
a
only
he doesn't
complaint,
wear a
your
military uniform.
he
He doesn't
doesn't
wear
need to.
But that's like what makes people fascist is this nationalistic mobilization of the military for the national destiny. That is the common thread in all fascism.
I mean, I've listed. Well, unfortunately, I only listed like what 11 of the 14 common threads that fascism has.
We can talk about the other three if you want.
I'm, I don't think it matters. Do you? Like I feel like that's gonna make it super fucking long. Like we could tackle point one and just argue about the cult of tradition forever.
Yeah, sure. I mean, but like again, I think that like when you look at the fascist governments that have actually taken place, they're very specific in the heritage that they're evoking, and they're in the very distant past. Trump is this vague notion that isn't specifically tied to a particular geopolitical state. Like, German fascists will talk a bit about the Holy Roman Empire, Italian fascists will talk about the Roman Empire, and it's tied to national borders and control of the world. America is the largest it's been. It hasn't lost anything, and it's all domestically focused on like this vague notion of maybe a 1940s to 1970s type of idealized cultural, I don't know, right? But it's not tied to like the national state or national borders or like the great American past, like when Julius Caesar was conquering France, right? That's not Trump's MO.
I'm I'm gonna let you try at this again, but I can't tell the difference here. I
I
don't
mean,
understand why, if like, especially because such like a key component to fascism is like a rejection of intellectualism by not stating what time period you
that's
like.
not true.
I feel like that's oh, it absolutely is true.
The Italian fascists were hella intellectual. They were big Hegelians. What are you talking about?
Um, this might just be me more educated on Nazi Germany than
Yeah,
Mussolini's
the
Italy.
the, the German fascists were much more anti-intellectual. I will grant you that. But the
Yeah.
Italians were all about it. They were all about uniting the spirituality and the state. They were very
Wait.
philosophical.
Well, then, would you say that Hitler wasn't fascist?
I mean, I think it's more tied to this. So like again, it's more about the military than I think you think it is. Right? So where is Trump's proverbial Austria? Where is the proverbial Ethiopia? Where is the Libya? Where is Greece? Where is Gaul? Like where are these where is my proverbial I need to expand? It's you would think it would be Mexico, but he hasn't really done anything to take over Mexico. He hasn't taken over the Middle East, right? In fact, he's less warmongering than Clinton was in the campaign. He hasn't done no-fly zones. He's not expansionist militarily. And like, okay, the Space Force, whatever, right? But he's not taking over land. He's not starting wars. He's not reclaiming land that was lost that is historically and traditionally been American, right? He's not doing that.
Um, sure, yeah. He's still expanding the military, engaging heavily in all the wars we're currently in. Why would he need to start new wars if we're already in 7? You can just like up those.
But he's not.
He
He's
is.
not. Has he called a draft? Has he called for nationalized arm production?
He doesn't need to.
No. Has he called for the youth to be educated in indoctrination camps? No. Like where I don't get it.
I just don't understand like why he would need to do these things if we were already doing them under like the current status quo.
I mean, there's tons of almost all school teachers are voting Democrats, and you can look at curriculum in California, and you can look at curriculum in various other states that are very much anti-Trump in the educational sphere. We're not already doing this as a nation. We're not indoctrinating children to Heil Trump. That's not happening.
I mean, I remember. I don't know about your high school, but I remember my high school heavily pushing the military on people. Did you not have that?
Yeah, but it's less now than it was after 9/11,
Ah, well, fuck. I
right?
guess Bush was a better fascist. I don't know what to tell
Yeah,
you, dude.
I mean,
I don't know what school's like right now. When did you go to school? Have you been to school under Trump?
I've not been in like high school or lower under Trump. I've been in college over, which is another
Yeah.
thing, right? Like in Nazi Germany, for example, you had the state person going in there making sure that the curriculum was nice and fascist. And when we look at America, like 80 to 70% of faculty members are anti-Trump people. Like,
Do
where's the
you
fascism
think?
there?
Do you think if Trump had the capability to do that, he would?
No, because
Really?
he could try to do it. He could try to do it with executive orders, and he doesn't even try. He doesn't even
Because it
try.
would be shot down by the courts in a moment.
Right.
He
So
would,
that makes him not a fascist. He's not actually trying to dismantle the government.
but he wants to do this
What is your evidence for saying that he wants to do this?
in
What has he
every
done?
way in which he handles himself. And every time he says, like every time he attacks the far left in the way he emboldens the far right, everything about him, I think, is trying to push into this direction. He just doesn't have the competency or the ability to go further
Both
against like
you and
current
I, both
state
you,
laws.
oh, sorry. Both you and I are old enough to remember Barack Obama throwing shade at Mitch McConnell for not letting him do what he wants. Both
Are
you
you
and
going to
I
say
are
these
old
two are
enough to remember
comparable?
that. Right? Both you and I are old enough to remember Obama wanting to push his version of the healthcare bill and his version of the budget, and then stupid Mitch McConnell filibustering like an asshole. And we remember Obama calling him out for it and bemoaning that fact. Obama's a fascist. This happened, but less with Bush because of 9/11, right? It happened with Bill Clinton when Newt Gingrich shut down the government, right?
Um, yeah, I'm gonna say, do you think that the way Obama talked about his opposition is anyway similar in which Trump talks about his? Because
Well,
it's not
yeah,
even fucking
sure.
close, dude. Yeah, and I would say like Obama is a good example of someone who has like reasonable gripes about his opposition, and he's upset, understandably so, that he's not able to get anything through. And then you have Trump's demonizing of anybody who's like
Oh, come on.
moderately like Biden's like a moderate Republican, and Trump is screaming that he's a communist. Like it's
Oh,
ridiculous.
come on. Come on. Were you alive during the '08 election? Were you alive during the 2012 election? Do you remember Republicans calling Barack Obama a socialist? This has been happening forever. Do you remember the Tea Party? It's been happening forever. It's not Trump uniquely. Just because you have a charismatic leader who is very bombastic and hyperbolic doesn't make you a fascist.
I mean, I wouldn't say that alone does.
That so being a bombastic, hyperbolic, charismatic leader
No,
makes
no,
you
it
a
just aids to
fascist.
it. It just aids to it. I'm not going to say that it does. I'm just saying that it
But
definitely
that's,
helps to
I
be a
mean, you
fascist.
presented an argument, and I would agree with you that Trump is a charismatic person who would like to do certain policies, would like to, be heavier handed with protesters, and would like to, be seen as the potentate. I will agree with you that that is his psychology. But just having that narcissistic psychology does not make you a fascist. We can point to tons of leaders in our history who have had this, who we would not call fascist per se, right? We can't call all of feudalism fascism. That would be wrong, right?
Right.
We
I
can't
just
call China
I'm
fascist.
unsure. I'm unsure when you see somebody demonstrate all of these capabilities. Um,
But you've
like
laid out an
what would
argument for
what
him
would
being.
Trump
Oh,
need
sorry.
to do? What would he have to do before you would say he's a fascist? And how many of these things can we see like in overall trends before we can try to call out fascism before he does that thing?
I mean, I think that for example, if after this election he refuses to step down after a court has ruled the election results, that would be a mark of fascism.
Then can't I call him for a fascist for him saying he wants to do that?
He has to actually do it. He can't just
Why?
say he
He's
wants to.
saying he wants to. I believe him.
No, because he said this before. People have said this before. Al Gore has done that before.
I mean, you keep mentioning Al Gore, but he does have like an actual argument.
Yeah,
He
but
won. He won in the actual election.
Trump
Fox
has an
News said he
actual
didn't,
argument too. But
and
Trump
then
has
they
an
just
actual
went
argument.
with it.
But Trump has an actual argument too.
No, he doesn't. If you count the votes and you listen to democracy, he would lose hypothetically. Is what we're all assuming.
Right. And then the courts are going to make him step down and he'll step down. That's what's going to happen. That's not fascistic. That's
I
just being
mean,
a poor loser.
hopefully, but then we say, okay, well, what if he doesn't step down and he like
Trump has the military is not the higher ranking members of the military are not as big a fan of Trump as you probably think he is. Does not have the support to stage a coup as well. If he got the support of the military and was starting, for example, forcing senators to vote on certain bills, that would be fascistic. But he's not doing that. He's not even trying, right? That would be another mark of fascism, right? Mandating certain educational policies within schools. That would be a fascistic to glorify the state and to indoctrinate children to be pro-Trump. That would be his. That would be a mark of fascism, right? Trying to annex countries instead of just doing this weird proxy war thing. That would be a mark of fascism, right? Mandating certain spheres of production in the economy. That would be fascism. Nationalizing arms industries and nationalizing other economic industries to do the will of the state. That would be fascistic. When
I
in
guess
fact,
we have so much overlap between private and government situations going on in America right now that I understand why Trump doesn't try to separate these two. If all of the people in charge were at some point in charge of the the corporate interest that is wanting these policies, and then we're making them happen. The two are like super intertwined in America, so when we say that he's not nationalizing them, I just don't see the need to.
yeah, but then we're talking about something different than fascism, right? We're talking about like a corporatistic, merit, like some weird corporatistic, like what's the word for it? Oligarchy type of situation where Trump is the lead patrician. We're not talking about fascism anymore. Right? The
I
fact that he doesn't need to do that makes him not a fascist.
I guess that's a pretty good point. If we were to call him because he is it culturally. If we were to call him like a corporate fascist, would you agree then?
I don't like, I mean, in a sense, I would agree to it, but like, I think he actually paradoxically like lacks like the militarism that is required to call him a fascist. Like I would expect him to be hiring a ton of private like military police to walk up and down the streets to make sure you're doing your good fascist labor for the state, right? He's not doing that. So I would hesitate to call him a corporate fascist. I would call him maybe like an oligarch, perhaps. A patrician like in mercantile, Venice and Geneva realms, things like that.
See, unfortunately, we can't do that because I feel like that lessens because like that's been every president since Eisenhower probably.
Maybe like a
Uh,
different question that would like get to my point is, do you consider China to be fascistic?
I don't, but there's definitely some strong connections between the two.
So like how is it that China is not fascistic when they fit much closer to the bill of what historically fascist regimes have been than Trump?
They, I think they're closer in certain regards, but I think they're a lot further in others.
What are they farther away from fascism in?
So I don't think that China is necessarily casting anybody as an other. I don't
What?
think that they're rejecting
Are
modernism
you
either.
I think you want to take back for the Uyghur Muslims. I think you want to take that.
You know, you actually wait, shit. I need to learn more about the
I
Uyghur
think you need
Muslims.
to
You
take
might be
that
right.
back.
No, 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 no. I'm uneducated on that. You're probably right.
And their dealings with African economic colonialism. I think you need to take that back,
Okay.
especially now with expansions in the South China Sea as well. They're creating America as another as well, and like South Korea and Japan and all them because they're like the Western democracies, right? So I would take.
I
I don't think that's true.
see, but they're like our biggest trade ally. I don't know. I'm speaking a little bit of ignorance when it comes to China.
Yeah, they're a big trade
So
ally. How is this fascistic on America's part when we're trading with these fools?
because
We're
we don't
exporting
demonize China. We don't
manufacturing.
demonize China.
Like we're exporting all our manufacturing to those people. How is this fascistic?
I mean,
We're still doing it. Trump is
when you
not
say
trying
we,
to bring back manufacturing.
I would say that corporations are, and the connection between corporations and the state are strong enough to where the state wants to help what's good for corporations. So by the corporations doing it and it helping them,
Yeah,
the
but
state wanting to help corporations, they don't
this
want
is
to
like
stop it.
not fascism at all then, right? This is the state serving corporations, not corporations serving the state, which is
But
real fascism.
well, the fascism's the connection of the two.
Yeah, but it's like the reverse relationship here because the fascist says corporations stop shipping to China. You're building a plant in America. We're building cars. We're building computers. Like, screw those other people. You have to nationalize now or we're going to kick you out. Like, that would be a fascistic approach. The corporation serves the state, not the other way around, dude, because it's the people of America that need to be served and need to produce, not the Chinese people, not the big wigs and corporations. That's different. That's different.
Mm,
What are the other points that China is far away from fascism in?
I'm gonna stick with the rejection of modernism.
China is rejecting modernism when they've actually gone through a period of westernization and modernizing their economy. What? They're ultra
They
rationalists.
they're ultra what?
Rationalists.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's they would have to reject that to be fascist,
And they don't.
and they don't, so they're not.
So that one characteristic is what makes people fascist. That's
No, it's not.
literally a bunch of people.
When we talk about like the cult of tradition, the modern Chinese government distances themselves from Mao. They aren't rejecting modernism. They're a super modernist country.
But
Um,
they are glorifying previous empire states in China, though. And they do have their forms of racism where like the ethnically Chinese is superior for their cultural tradition. And if you look at like their academic research, they do a lot of stuff trying to say that like there's even like scholars who will say that Buddhism came from China because they want to glorify their Chinese heritage.
well, then why don't they just pick Confucius?
Well, they do as well. But they try to
Okay.
co-opt other cultures as being originary from Chinese because they want to lay claim to. That seems very fascistic to me.
Um, I I just don't see it to the degree that I think it needs to be done.
Well,
Like
I mean,
when I think of China, I think of them trying to push forward for a 5-year
would
plan,
you
talking about
agree?
like what the goal of the future is going to be. I don't see them like looking back at like, oh, let's make China great again. There's this y- point in China's past where we were great. where they're not trying to bring back like the third dynasty or anything. They're trying to push towards the future. I just don't think they meet that.
I would potentially agree to that, but I mean, it doesn't seem. I mean, your view of fascism is very weird because it seems like you're cherry picking the characteristics that make you a fascist, and then also cherry picking the necessary requirements that must be met for you not to be a fascist. Like you're kind of cherry picking here.
It's tough because both examples are authoritarian. So I think there's going to be some overlap. But I'm not
Sure.
going to look at an authoritarian state and say every authoritarian state is fascist. I think that
So,
China does like a lot of really cringe shit that probably also fascists do, but I don't think that they meet the spirit of what fascism wants to be.
So, like, kind of the point I'm trying to make with the China example is it seems like China is much more close to being considered a modern day fascist government than America is. And you're refusing to call China fascist and saying that America is. I think that
I
even if China isn't fascist, they're closer in similarity to fascism than America is.
Okay. See, this is I think our like contention in the argument is I'm not trying to say that America is fascist. That wasn't the argument
Sure.
I put forward to make because I don't think we are. I think we're like a neoliberal oligarchy. Um, but what I do think is I think Trump himself, if possible, if he had the ability to become our supreme leader, he would, and it would be a fascistic state.
Yeah, but like
I
again,
want to separate
as
America.
an individual then, is Xi Jinping is he a fascist?
I don't know anything about him particularly. I know he's doing some like
He's
a lot
banned
of green
Winnie the
investment.
he's
So
banned Winnie the Pooh images in his country because they make fun of him.
he might be. I don't know anything about the guy. Let me say maybe.
Okay. But
I,
again,
I
I think
there's
that
a chance I would say he is.
I think I've made my point though on this. And I think we'll just probably just go in circles at this point on this
Um
China question.
yeah.
Then
I mean
definitely the social control is much higher in China, and there's much more of a will to implement that. And there's a single party system. Dissent is systematically crushed. Here in America, it's not, right? It's only sporadically. Like in Louisville, they didn't put in. I live in Kentucky, so I can say this. In Louisville, they didn't call in Trump's secret forces, right? In China, you bet they would be there,
yeah.
right?
I believe the law that he abused. Where's Kentucky? I'm so fucking
It's
stupid.
above Tennessee. It's below the Great Lakes. It's
Okay.
like,
Are you guys like within 100 miles of a large body of water? Because I heard that was the law he abused to be able to call in
oh,
the
I don't. I mean, probably not. No, but the governor here rejected it and he offered it. So it would have happened had the governor, accepted it. But I mean, also the people in Portland were much more violent. So there is that as well.
yeah. So what's your opinion on him cracking down on the protesters and us losing and like us seeing the death of the First Amendment?
I mean, I don't think that we have the death of the First Amendment per se, but I think it's definitely wrong. I think some of the state government actions has made the state governments illegitimate. I think that the federal enforcement is anti-constitutional, but I don't think doing one anti-constitutional act or just having one aspect that is similar to fascism makes you, under definition, a fascist. I don't think you can point to one singular thing and say, haha, you did this one thing that the fascists did that one time. Haha, you're fascist now. I don't think that's right.
I I agree. I
True.
don't think that's right, but I think at some point we need to start calling it before the point happens. I don't want to wait till the concentration camps to say, "Oh, hey guys, this guy should have been stopped." You know what I mean?
Yeah, but you see, like the problem that I have with your view is that again, I hate to bring back China, but China has actual concentration camps, and you're not calling them fascist. So, at what point do we call that fascist under your view? It seems that in America the bar is like ridiculously low, and but for other countries it's ridiculously in the sky. Like
If
the
I
country.
knew more, if I knew more about China, there's a chance I might be.
Okay, fair enough.
I yeah. I don't want to say like outright, but I feel like I would need to know more. And as I said, China's super authoritarian. I don't like China. I would prefer America under Trump over what so far
Sure,
parentheses first term Trump.
sure.
Um I don't want to say what he'll do in the future
Yeah,
because
sure,
it's like
sure,
scary
sure.
shit,
I,
but
I, I, I would definitely also prefer it, and I also am not a Trump supporter. So we're on the same page there.
yeah, that China's like this. I hate authoritarianism. I don't like China. Um, I only say that I don't think they're fascist. In regards of the bit that I know of their government, it looks like they push towards the future, not towards the past.
I think Arco made a good point in the chat that I was also wanting to talk about. So, like in World War II, a Japanese internment, did that make the American government fascist? I don't think it does.
No,
Again,
it
one
didn't.
singular thing, cracking down on protesters in a couple of instances, does not entail that you're fascist.
I mean, I think it has a lot to do, especially like because the fascists I've spoken to talk so much about like like almost like a spiritual essence of fascism that it's something that's really hard to like nail with materialistic situations because they care so much about rhetoric and about optics. And then I see like what Trump is doing, and I say like rhetoric, his rhetoric sounds like fascism, his optics seem like fascism. The things he's trying to do seem like fascism. He's crushing freedom. This is something authoritarian states do. But fascism's an authoritarian state.
He's
Like
not really crushing your freedom.
I I'm not gonna let you say that while we tear gas protesters. I'm just not. I love the First Amendment and him
I
attacking
mean,
that's crazy.
you're right that there are specific instances where we agree that you can't do things, right? But if Trump was truly fascist, he would start doing internet censorship, right? And we
I
actually see that on the internet, it's actually anti-Trump biased in certain spheres, right? And Trump allows this to happen. There's no opposition. And it's the Senate who's trying to do this stuff, not Trump. The Senate's trying to crack down on.
okay. No, he just renewed NSA internet surveillance.
Yeah, but Obama did this too.
Yeah, yeah.
So that can't make him a fascist. Anyway, I think that this has been a good debate, and been going for like almost an hour and a half.
All right. Um Yeah, I feel like if we do closing statements, I think we're both gonna nail each other too hard. So let's just end it
Yeah,
awkwardly.
yeah.
Okay.
I agree. I agree.
Because I was gonna say if you get an ending statement, I'm gonna want to go, and if I get one, I know you're gonna
Right,
want to go.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we'll just have this awkward ending. All right, that's it. Good game, everybody.
This was great. I had a lot of fun in this debate. I think we covered a lot of ground and was pretty productive. I think
Yeah.
it was fun. I enjoyed
I
it a lot,
I
man.
feel like our final contention, if I can just say
Sure.
this, I feel like our final contention is I think it's fair to say that our key difference between the two of us is I see a couple of things that happen in the past, and I don't want to say I'm jumping the gun. I'm hedging my bets now for my anxieties about what I see. And you're willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that you don't think he's going to do it.
Yeah, because I haven't. I mean, I would agree to that with the stipulation that he has not gone that extra step in his 4 years that he's been president. Like he hasn't done it yet.
Okay. Yeah, sure. All right, awesome. Fantastic.